Welcome to another episode of the Work and Play Podcast, special edition, live edition of the Work and Play Podcast. And I'm here with my folks on Instagram and my folks on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, literally tapping all platforms so that we can get the word out as much as possible. I want to thank you to all of the viewers, all of the listeners of the Work and Play Podcast, because I just reached a milestone. I just reached a milestone that I've been working on since I started the podcast. And that is, we have over 1,000 subscribers to the Work and Play Podcast. Woo! So, one, I can't be more excited because there are people who are invested in the message. And now I have a responsibility to deliver more content, even better content that addresses the need. Because there are folks who are in their 9 to 5 and they're transitioning into entrepreneurship. And the questions are, how do I do it? How do I make money outside of my job? How do I start a business after I leave my job? Is starting a small business the right time for me? All these questions, and you get to either hear it from me or when I'm coaching through my guests, you get to hear the conversations of my guests and many entrepreneurs who have been in corporate and done the same thing. So this conversation is going to be for you. If you know that you're like, I got what it takes, I just don't know what it looks like to be on the other side, to create consistent income, to live a life outside of the corporate structure, to find out a new business, to offer something that I've never been in sales before. All of these questions will be debunked on the podcast. But today I want to address a special subject that has honestly been a part of my life for the last 2 years. It is how to start a podcast. Now, I never came out into this space as a guru or an expert on podcasting because I was learning podcasting myself. And even though I had made certain strides, I hit 100 episodes of the podcast, I was already just consistently putting out an episode. I quickly turned up to 2 episodes and I made about $5,000 on my episode before I even started monetizing on YouTube. So all these things told me, you know what? I'm asked all these questions often about how did I start the podcast? How was I successful in podcasting? And I've been putting it on the back burner for a long time. But now I realize there's a lot about the journey that is not being talked about. And honestly and truly, it's where my secrets lie. So to give y'all some context, if you haven't watched an episode of the Work and Play podcast, or if you haven't joined a live with me before, I started my career in data analytics. Data analytics at the time that I started was it was something up and coming, honestly. In the merchandise space or e-commerce space, there was no e-commerce. It was literally online. So first it was online sales. So I used to work for Target.com, and then when we started to say, hey, inventory can be online and in the store, and we want people to have access to it, we started calling it multi-channel. And then it became omni-channel when we started to think about how we wanted to merge these things. Now we have e-commerce. So I've been a part of this process of digital data for a long time. And I'll be honest with you guys, on my journey to exit corporate America, I wanted to throw those things away. I literally wanted to throw those skills away. I wanted to throw away data because it just, I don't know. I just never embraced it, honestly, because big data was a thing and we felt like everyone was watching us. And I felt like I was a part of the problem. Honestly and truly, I can't lie. But in entrepreneurship, where I failed and where I succeeded, I failed at learning how to monitor my data at a small level because I was so used to managing large budgets, millions of dollars, millions of customers, that kind of thing. And so when it came to looking at the numbers, I'm like, how do I make sense of 5 likes and 2 shares? And how do I make sense of this? What is the audience telling me? I wasn't quite sure what that was. And I didn't feel like I had enough data to make decisions like I did when I was in corporate America. So I was a bit frustrated. And even still, I wanted to throw that mindset away, the systems, the processes, the data, all of that stuff. The reason I tell you that is because much of my success in podcasting has been because of my 10 years of experience looking at numbers, looking at data, and seeing what is working. So I wanted to share that context with you because if you're already in a role that might be quantitative and you're like, how do I get into podcasting, which is completely different from what I do, then I don't want you to worry about being inadequate in this space. Like we look at YouTubers and we're like, oh my God, they have this wonderful personality. And at the time, if you knew me, no one. I literally got a comment from an old coworker of mine. She said, I've never seen this side of you before. Because I never showed this side of me before. So you might be sitting in your desk telling yourself, I don't have what it takes to be a personality on YouTube or on social media. And you do. More than likely, you just have to pull yourself away from the cubicle for a little while, test out those vocal experience, those vocal skills, those communication skills, and learn how to show up on camera. That might be the training that you need in order to stay in the game. But then the numbers is what's going to help you stay committed and see that everything is working. Okay. So does that make sense? Like, does that make sense? Oh, by the way, if you're just seeing this cut for the first time, thank you so much for shouting me out. Listen, Schoolie Hustle. Rakhi, thank you so much for commenting on the hair. This is a new hairstyle. And I guess it's an example of my courage to do something that doesn't necessarily feel comfortable for a lot of people, but you will learn that by doing things that are uncomfortable to you, that is where the growth is. That is where the growth is. So this conversation is not about getting comfortable. It's about getting uncomfortable. But I want to share some of the journey with you. So you might want to start a podcast yourself. You might be thinking about, how do I create my own online persona? And promise you are, if you're like me, you have it all figured out. You have your idea of the vision. You know how you're going to execute it. You know what topics you want to share, but you haven't yet pressed the record button. There's something holding you back. And I don't know what it is, but I want to share a couple things that helped me from holding myself back in this journey. Now, I started my journey of podcasting way before I hit record on my first episode. All right. Shout out to my mentor, David Shands, because if it hadn't been for him throwing me in situations where I had to show up and have a conversation on camera, I don't know if I would have even had the courage or the muscle memory to even start. So my first advice to you, I had someone literally call my name, sit me in a chair and say, interview this person. And then I started to speak and ask questions and it became natural, but it was not, I repeat, it was not natural from the beginning. But I want to say thank you, because that got me into the muscle memory. So I want to encourage you, if it's not actually in front of the camera, start interviewing people when you meet someone. If you go to the mall, like, start asking questions about what their journey is, especially if it's in the topic that you want. Now, I'm saying this because my podcast is an interview podcast. I've had over 100 guests on the episode, but you might not want to interview people. You might want to test out your voice solo dolo. That is why you'll see that I started doing solo episodes, maybe like 20 episodes in, because I had to get used to my voice on its own. This year, I did not do it regularly. Oh, what's up? What's going on? What's up, King Energy? See, you did what you were supposed to do, because I told them. So those of you guys who are watching on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, or LinkedIn, I told my family on Instagram that I'm going to be sharing a special presentation here on YouTube, and I can't show you guys on on Instagram. So if you want to join here on YouTube, please do now, because like I told you, I want to share some things with y'all. So I told you, David put me in a chair, literally asked me, like, told me, hey, go interview somebody, right? So I want to show you guys what this looks like. This does not exist anywhere on my channel or anywhere on my audio channel. So if y'all want to see what it looks like, come on to YouTube real quick. I'm getting ready to show it right now. So let me present the screen real quick. This is what it looked like for me to record my very first conversation. And don't laugh at me. I'm going to tell you that right now. Here we go.
7 or 8 years old.
And they just have to put it out there.
Yeah, they took it
your idea.
Yeah, they took it from me.
Yeah.
I take credit for that. I have the blueprints at my house.
Yes, that's your unique intellectual property.
Yeah, I take credit for that. But I actually met with the architect, and he showed me all his blueprints and stuff. No disrespect, but I was like, I don't want to sit here and draw.
Absolutely.
I'm not good at it. I don't want to. So one thing my dad always told me that stuck with me was, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And so I was like, well, what do I?
And that is the first time I ever sat in a chair to ask someone about their life. Now, that conversation was so good. You see, that was actually Jay Remy, a friend of mine who started an entrepreneurship with me. And he was so willing to share his story. That's how I realized the power in telling your story. So what he said was, if you love what you do, if you love what you do, you never have to work a day in your life. That is the cornerstone of the Work and Play podcast. And I decided to continue on with this idea before I even had a name for the podcast. So that's the second thing I want to share. You cannot procrastinate. So if you don't have a name, if you don't know what you're going to talk about, you don't know what topics that you're going to do, get started. Simply start speaking. And I offer the same advice for people who've never journaled before, because if you've never journaled before, you don't even know how to start the conversation. More than likely, you're like, I don't know why I'm journaling right now, but the goal is for me to be more sane. And that is all you need. Shout out to Tatiana in the room. Listen, I don't need you to procrastinate thinking that you need topics. And I didn't start topics until maybe the 110th episode of the podcast, to be honest with you guys. Now, if you look at the latest podcast, obviously they look way better than that video that I just showed you. So I want you to realize you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to have it all figured out. You literally just need to get started, and you can get started with the smallest bit of equipment. All right. So the next thing that I want to share with you guys is this idea that everything has to be perfect. Now, I know we live in 2022 and that presents this facade that everything has to be perfect. Like your camera has to look nice. Your video needs to look nice. We have all these wonderful aesthetics out there. Those of you guys who are joining on Instagram, you want to be here on YouTube and Facebook, or YouTube, you can click the link in my bio, because we're doing a little bit of a presentation today. And I want you guys to be able to see it. But a lot of people think that they need that equipment to get started, and you don't. So I want to show you another thing. So before I do that, I suffer with the thought of perfectionism. There were times when I wanted to record and I just hit the stop button because I said, oh, this just isn't right. So if you think about it, I could have started a podcast much sooner if I did not let myself delay. And that's probably the only regret that I have about this journey, that I didn't start sooner. You don't need special extra mics. Okay, so I'll tell you, I've had journeys. I've started with the USB mic. I've used these wireless mics before. Like, I'll show you just in case you want to know what mics I use. And I have evolved over time. So this next video I want to share with you guys is the first episode that I actually launched on YouTube. And I was so not comfortable with sharing something that was so not perfect. The spirit of perfection literally came from me being in marketing and me being ahead of the communications that went out to all departments. That means when Delta decided to launch a new route from Atlanta to Johannesburg, I was supposed to send out the communication. Now, in that process, I had to write it, rewrite it, send it to all departments, get approval, make edits, and then send it to my leader, who could then make more edits, and then I have to make edits again, right? The process, the iterative process of approval was just normal to me. It was a part of, my being, right? So when I'm recording my own podcast, I'm waiting on that level of perfection. But you know who's the only, person to approve your podcast? You. You're the producer, you're the director, you're the talent, you're all of the things, right? So I want to show you guys my first episode that I ever launched on the Work and Play podcast. And don't laugh at me once again. Do not laugh, okay? Check this out.
You know what? I found that it was very working on that also helped me work in my professional life.
Tell me more.
Ooh, this girl is good. So
Yeesh.
I've heard it.
So let me reintroduce my bestie. She is here to share her career story, as well as just have some good conversation about life, career exploration, self-actualization, and whatever that means to you guys and whatever it means to you. All right. Can y'all see? Can you guys see? Can you see the production? Now, I had no media experience before this, but I knew there was two things that mattered. And these are the two things that are going to matter for your show. Audio had to be crispy, okay? I could not jeopardize the audio. And then the video needed to look somewhat presentable, okay? So when I started this podcast, and let me show you what it looks like one more time. When I started this podcast, I want y'all to notice the details, and then we'll talk about it. Hold on 1 second. Let's check it out. I want to start from the beginning, but I'm just going to keep letting it play. So without further ado, would you introduce yourself to the guests?
Hey everyone, I'm Chi Chi. What do you want to know? Like my work stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
So how about this? Chi Chi and I we met when we worked at Target in 2013. I was a business analyst, fresh business analyst at 23, had no clue what I was doing, but I was making good money. And then Chi Chi was?
I was a merchandise specialist. I was contracted at Target.
So, pause. What did y'all notice about that episode, the first episode? I want to know, like, the things that y'all noticed. Production value, anything that, like, share whatever you think you noticed on the podcast. And I will tell you the things that I wanted you to pay attention to. So, what were some of the things that y'all noticed about that episode? And I'm curious, whether y'all watching on the live or the replay. What went into the process, I just showed you all these different mics. That mic right there was a lapel mic that I had for years that was in my drawer. And I said, I'm going to put this little lapel mic to use. So what you see in the video is a little lapel mic that's sitting between me and my guest, Chi Chi. And it's just close enough so that it will catch our voice, but it was attached to my phone. I was using my phone at the time, and I would have used my phone to show y'all, but I'm on live right now. I literally said, as long as exactly King Energy, as long as my video was nice and my audio was nice, I was going to be fine. So I had the little lapel mic sitting between me and my guest, and then I was using my phone for the video, right? Now, I was still presented with one more issue. I'm fighting perfectionism the entire way because if you notice, I'm not in my studio. I wasn't in our chair in a quiet space. I was actually at Pont City Market. So if you're here in Atlanta, then you know Pont City Market is essentially like a cafeteria. So it was about noon, lunchtime at Pont City Market. And I'm recording a podcast with a lapel mic and my phone with the camera set up. I'm pretty sure that the people who were shopping and walking past were like, what is she doing and why does she have the camera? But that's the thing. You cannot let other people make you feel like you look stupid. Like that was absolutely a thought that went in my mind. These people are going to look at me recording myself. They're going to think I want to be on YouTube. I'm like, oh, you do want to be on YouTube. They're going to think I want to be an influencer. Oh, you do want to be an influencer. Got it. So why would I let people who don't even know me stop me from getting my episode done? So the next thing that was a challenge of me being perfect outside of the mindset shift was that audio. I'm in a cafeteria. I'm talking over people who are downstairs having their lunch and having regular conversations, so there's no quiet on the set. And that was the only location that we could have done that episode before she went out of town. So I had to do what I needed to do. Audio, I learned literally in the moment how to edit audio. Any episode that you look at on the Work and Play podcast, the first 50, I want to say, I edited myself. So the video quality and the audio quality. Oh, and did y'all see the little clips? I want to show you guys one more clip. I want to show you guys one more clip of that episode because I learned in the moment how to put those little name cards on there, how to put the title up there, how to actually edit the audio. Because if you heard the raw sound, it would sound like I was in a cafeteria. Like it was so loud. So I had to learn in that moment, how do I reduce the background noise and how do I elevate the guest noise, the guest sound? I learned that all in the moment. And I want you to know you can learn in the moment too. There's nothing stopping you from getting started except getting started. Okay. So perfectionism, we got to overcome it. Now, I will tell you some basic things that you need to start your podcast. You're going to need a mic. Remember, I told you I started with a lapel mic. Because, and if I had started with a lapel mic in my studio, it probably would have been great sound now that I know what I know now. But eventually I used a USB mic. So this right here, I'll show you the name. It is a Blue Yeti mic. And I started with this one for the first, like, maybe like I said, 50 episodes. That's like the point that I started to elevate. I started with my camera. Now, for you guys, there's a caveat. So some people have an iPhone, some people have an Android. The only detail, I'm not going to go too far in the weeds, but you'll see a difference in your process later on, and we can talk about that, whether you record in 4K versus 1080p. And if you don't know what that means, then we can have a whole conversation on like what that actually means. But you want to be mindful of how you record your video on your phone. Okay. The next thing is, how do you edit? I edited the first, again, about 50 episodes with my phone on an app called InShot. That's INSHOT. So when you talk about perfectionism, I literally started the podcast in the Pont City Market location. What? I found a location and it happened. The microphone that I used was a lapel mic that I had in my drawer for years. Okay, that's the equipment. I use my cell phone as the camera, and I use InShot to edit. These were the basic necessities, and I'll share one more. I use Audacity to edit the audio. Okay, so I literally had 5 basic things to start my podcast, and if I hadn't got that first one out of my system, meaning like me with Jay Remy, and if I didn't get the second one out of my system, I wouldn't be where I am today, making over almost 10K on the podcast before I even monetized my channel, and getting so many more out of my system that they're getting better over time. So real quick, let me go to the questions. Did you have a script? Oh, I did not have a script at this point. To be honest with you guys, I never have a script. But I'm starting to embrace the idea that I need to have more planning in place. So I take more notes, right? And I start writing questions before I have guests, and I plan the episodes beforehand. Now, as we get more and more mature in this game, y'all are going to see different angles. You guys are going to see better topics. And even the guests might even seem more established and more prepared for the conversation. So this is all front end and back end work that I've done to really get to where I am today. So your first podcast might look just like this, but your next podcast and the podcast after that can look way better than mine if you evolve. You just have to know where you're going. So I want to shout out my mentor, Dave Shans, because if it hadn't been for him showing us his back end, so we were in the morning meetup, which you've seen an ad for in the podcast. If it hadn't been for him showing his back end, I wouldn't have connected the dots between my data analytics skills and organization skills and my ability to organize the podcast. So I will tell you, organization of my podcast has been one of the number one things that has reduced any overthinking, any process issues, any confusion of how I was going to get the podcast out, because everything was laid out for me right in my Google Drive. So I created an Airtable, which I've shown you guys before. And I had a Google Drive that literally organized all my videos, my social media strategy, like clips, all that stuff was all in one place. And I saw it in one glimpse of his computer in my head. I downloaded it and I knew how to make it happen. So I want you to know, you don't have to overthink. There's more to the process, but we don't have enough time to like get into all the details. But I promise to come on and share a little bit more about the journey as you move forward. Because I coach people who want to leave their corporate jobs, I've been realizing that you can do much more to start that journey to entrepreneurship before you quit your job. And the way that people approach podcasting right now is very lackadaisical. But what if you start with intention? What if you start knowing that you want to reach a certain goal or mindset in your podcast? What if you start knowing that you want to make money in the podcast? What if you embrace some of these things that I know right now from the beginning, knowing that you can actually make good money on a podcast with intent, right? If you could do that, you don't have to worry about knowing all the things. You just have to be willing to get started. You just have to be willing to get started and willing to get better each episode at a time. So what does your first podcast episode look like? Right now, it looks like something in your head, but I promise you, it's going to look awful to you when you get to your 100th episode. But don't let that stop you. Know that you have great content in your spirit. Know that you have good stories and you have information that people need to hear from you. Your story is valuable, and there's so many conversations that aren't being had in the public that you can start today. There's so many people who tell me, wow, like I'm in corporate America and I never saw anything that existed that's like what you talk about. I didn't even start the podcast to be unique. I started the podcast to talk about my coaching business. I started the podcast so that people can know that it's possible, so that I don't have to force it down your throat or make you decide whether you want to leave. The people who come to me and they want to be coached have already decided that they want to leave their jobs. But the podcast is for you to know that it's possible, so that by the time we have a coaching conversation, you already know what it is that you want. I am super excited to bring this episode to y'all. Like when I tell you, podcasting has been in my blood for the last 2 years. And I woke up and I realized this is my new career. This is my new vocation. I can talk about podcasting with my hands behind my back. From the first episode you launch to the analytics that you need to look at to decide what episodes are going well and what episodes are not going well, which content people want to see more of and which content people don't want to see more of. Like all of those things have come in handy, and the processes and organization that I love is really what makes the podcast super easy. I don't have to think about it. Like even today, I have a podcast guest coming in my house and I have a process already ready for her to sit down and process her episode with no problem. So I'm excited because I know that you want to get into podcasting as well. You know, some of you do, some of you want to share your story, some of you want to do like vlogs and stuff. But if you know you want to start a podcast, and I think that this conversation was like past due because people have been asking me like, hey, how do you start a podcast? Hey, do you help people start podcasts? And I've been like, no, because I wanted to master my own craft. So this episode is live, so I don't have any problem with saying that this was done on a Friday, October 5th, right? And that I want to offer you guys an opportunity to stay connected. I am creating something that is amazing. It is literally the thing that changed the game on my podcast process, and the fact that I've been able to put out consistent episodes without missing a day episode launch since I started. So I want to be able to share that with you. And I want to take you on the journey of me creating it with you guys so that I can share with you and it can make it super easy for you to get started and in the game much quicker than I did. Right? So all you have to think about is getting better at your speaking and your presenting and your question asking. And you can leave the processes and the nuts and bolts to me. So if y'all are curious about that, I dropped a link. I actually just dropped my number in the description so that you can text me the word podcast to 678-833-0835. I'm gonna say it one more time, because if you're curious and you know you want to get into podcasting, but you're like, how do I get started? Where do I even start? I need you to text me podcast at 678-833-0835 so we can have a conversation about how I can help you start your podcast. I've been through all of the mess ups. I've recorded podcasts without audio. I've recorded full episodes without even turning on the record button. I've been through many, many mistakes. I've gone through retakes. I've seen myself do some things that I've never really expected. And I've also seen myself blossom. So if y'all want to go back and watch that old episode, you actually can. Some of the footage that I shared on this episode is not available to the public, but I thank y'all for being on the journey with me. That's the biggest thing and the biggest thank you that I have been received, and that continues to motivate me to put more and more episodes out there. So thank y'all so much for being listeners of the Work and Play podcast. This episode is sponsored by the Corporate Exit Blueprint and the Podcast Blueprint, which is these two things are going to help you identify ways to build a stream of income outside of corporate America, which you absolutely can do. Right? I thank y'all so much for being on the process with me. I'm going to let you guys go talk to my Instagram folks for a bit, and then we're going to hop on out of here. But thank y'all so much for being such supporters of the Work and Play podcast. Y'all have a wonderful day. Peace.